Of project creation within Collect Earth Online. If you don't know already, Collect Earth Online is a cloud-based software that is free and accessible to everyone. Since it's online, you do not need desktop installation, and multiple users are able to simultaneously contribute to data collection. Through CEO, you have access to multiple sources of satellite imagery, including Planet NICFI data and other assets available on Google Earth Engine. This software promotes consistency within locating, interpreting, and labeling reference data, and there are options for quality control within the project. Sample data from CEO can be used for area estimation required by RED+ and several other initiatives. It was collaboratively developed by all of these organizations. In this demonstration, we're going to cover creation of a project from scratch, which includes adding imagery, creating plot and sample designs, creating survey questions and survey rules, and editing the Geo-Dash board. We will also go through creating and editing a project from a template. So let's get started. We'll go to Collect Earth Online and open it up. I'm already logged in, and I'm going to enter this institution. Now within each institution, you might see several projects already. If the project data collection has been completed, it will be green. In progress projects are yellow, and red ones have not had data collection completed or started. So let's click on this Create New Project button. You'll see that there are several steps to creating a project: the overview, imagery selection, plot design and sample design, and then survey question and survey rule creation. So if we're not using a template for this first demonstration, I'm going to type a generic name, CEO demo, and I will use that same description. You have to type something there. This project I'm going to make available to just my institution group members. And then there are a couple of project options that you can select. There's an option to allow a Google Earth Engine script tool to pop up on your collection page. If you are importing point locations using a CSV file that has metadata, you might also want to select this Show Extra Plot Columns. I'm not going to do that for this one because I'm going to use generic auto-generation of my sample locations. When you are collecting data as an interpreter, you can have the option to input your plot confidence from a scale of 0 to 100. This option is really useful if you need to review points of low confidence because it's easily filterable using our built-in quality control tools. There's also something called the Geo-Dash or Geo-Dashboard that is available as a tool for interpretation. That will open up in a separate tab, but you can also just click on the button that says Geo-Dash. So I'm going to set it up that way. I'll have a button for my Google Earth Engine script that allows me to look at some Landsat trends, and I'm going to have plot confidence collected. So there's public imagery available underneath the imagery selection section. You can have OpenStreetMap, Planet NICFI, and Mapbox Satellite. I will select all of those. And then within your institution, you might have a lot of other imagery. I have already created this one called Dynamic World, a small demonstration area. So let me show how you do that if you want to add more imagery to your institution that you can add to this project. So let's back it up a little bit. Back to this institution's page. And underneath imagery, I'll delete the one that I've already created, and we're going to make that one again. So earlier today, I downloaded a small area of a composite of the Dynamic World Google Earth Engine asset. This is land cover data. And I've set up a parameterization that shows a palette with each color representing different land cover types from 0 to 8. And we'll do full opacity. If you have something already set up like this, you can get the asset path from over here in your Assets tab, hit this Share button, and make sure that is set to anyone can read. If this is not checked, it will not work in CEO, so make sure you do that. I'm going to click on it and get the asset path to this asset, and I will put that into, let me get the right tab here. So add new imagery. We're going to select Google Earth Engine image asset. You can also do image collections, and there are a few other ones that are already preloaded for you to select. I'll put the image asset ID here. I'm going to name it something similar, and this is just a small demonstration area. Now to get the visualization parameters, the way that I think it's easiest to get is once it's visualized, you mess with it by adding certain palettes. You can adjust the colors. I hit this import button, and then the image visualization parameters will pop up in the top of the script. If you have not already generated something for image visualization, you can leave that blank with just 2 parentheses, but it's much more useful to have that parameterization for the palette here. It's also nice to be able to create those by looking at the example and getting the visualization parameters that same way. So once it's loaded to the top of my script, I'll hit this blue box with lines, scroll all the way down to the bottom where I have that imported, and I'll copy everything between the 2 curly brackets. Make sure you don't include the semicolon at the end. That will make it not work. So just the curly brackets, as was shown in the example here. I'll copy paste that and click Add New Imagery. And now that is available to my institution. So when I go back to the Projects tab and create a new project, I'll do that CEO demo project again. Going to select the options that I prefer for my project options, select all of the public imagery, and then I'm also going to click on this new imagery asset that I want available for this project. Okay, so now we get into plot design, and there are several ways to do this. Option 1 is to draw a square on the map. If you do not have exact locations for sample collection points that you want, so let's zoom in on this area here. You hit the Command key on your keyboard, click and drag to select a square. It might be a little bit different if you're using a Windows machine. I'm using a Mac. And I can do random point selection and type in how many of those plots I want. So if I want 200 plots, I'll get exactly 200. However, if I want to make a grid design auto-generated in CEO, I would select the plot width. So let's say 30 meters, similar to a Landsat pixel. And then maybe I want to do 100 meters apart. But you can see it's calculated that makes 14 million plots. And that is over the maximum capacity allowed for CEO, which is 5,000. So I need to increase that spacing. I'll increase it enough that I have 1,450 plots. And they can be squares or circles. Think about plots as polygons in which you collect your sample data points. There can be just 1 point per plot, or there can be several. So this square plot, which is 30 by 30 meters in this case, will just be the general area that I'm looking at with a very specific point location for your samples. You can also import exact locations, if you know them, using a CSV file. So if I already have point locations that I want to import, I can select a CSV file similar to this one. So I'll open this up and zoom in. You need to have columns for long, lat, plot ID, and sample ID, and everything else is extra metadata. Your plot ID will be from 0 to however many plots you would like, and then your sample ID would be the plots that are within that, the samples that are within that plot. In this case, I only have one sample per every plot. In this example, I have several samples per plot. So you can see here for plot 1, there are 12 different sample IDs. And then for plot 2, there are several different sample IDs. Okay, so there will be a combination of whatever you like that will work for your project. If you would like to import your plots as a shape file, you can also do that. Here's a quick example of several plots, which you can see as red squares. Okay, so I had this as a shape file. It's actually, when I upload a shape file, you need to include several different files and zip them together. That exact list is written out for you here. So make sure you have all of those and zipped together if you want to use a shape file. In this example, for this project that I'm showing in QGIS, I used a shape file to create several meter squares in red, and then the points, if you zoom in, are not simply a grid or random distribution for my samples. I wanted 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in all of the corners, so this was very specific, and I generated these points elsewhere, and I exported them as a CSV file. So you can have a shape file for your plot design, and then a CSV file or a shape file for your sample generation design. If we're doing something simple, for this example, let's do a grid design. I'll note that if you have CSV file selected, you won't be able to do that command key selection. You have to be either selecting gridded or random, and then it will allow you to select an area. So I'm going to zoom in here again. Command, click and drag, just this tiny area. 30 meter plot width, several meters apart so that I only have 966. Okay, now for my sample design, as I said, you can have several samples per each of those 30 by 30 meter plots. The plot is the yellow square, the samples are the black points. You can have random, you can have a grid, and tell it how many meters apart you want them to be. If I have 10 meters apart, there's about 9 samples per plot. Or most commonly, usually we only have 1 sample per plot. So this is just 1 sample within a 30 by 30 meter square. You can also allow users to draw their own samples. This would be in cases like if I gave them a square, but I wanted them to draw exactly where the forest stand boundary was. So that is possible. So that's your plot design and sample design. But let me back up to this new option we have relatively recently for quality control within CEO. So if you know who the data collectors will be for the interpretation, I can make sure they're part of my institution, and I can add their email addresses directly into the project, and then it will be split either evenly amongst those 3, 4, however many people, or I can assign them each a percentage. Let's say I want the first person to have 50% of the plots, and then these people don't have as much time to commit to the project, so I'm only giving them 25% of the plots. So that's something you can do. But make sure that you only use this feature if you know who will be collecting the data for your project. If you don't know, you probably just want to allow it for anyone to collect. Then for quality control, you can either select this overlap option, where how many of the points do you want to have reviewed in duplicate or in triplicate. So at least 2 or 3 of these people would look at this many of the points. Or there's something called SME, Subject Matter Expert Verification. So if I had another person who I believe was pretty experienced in the imagery interpretation for this region, I could add their address and say, I want them to review, let's say, 20% of all of the plots that were collected by these people. And then the export file would end up being a CSV file with all of the answers by the regular interpreter, and then a second line with the SME verification as a data point. Same thing for overlapping. You would have 2 lines for each one of these data points in the resulting file. Okay, so we finished plot design and sample design. Next step will be survey question creation. So when you are asking the interpreters to answer questions, you can ask those questions as a button text question, where it's, let's say, an example of, is it forest? Is land cover forest? Now, I do recommend to make these questions pretty short and to avoid any special characters, especially commas, if you can, because that can sometimes cause issues when you download the file as the results as a CSV file. Sometimes when you open it up in a new program, it can be confusing. So try to avoid having commas or special characters in your questions if you can, and keep them short so that when you have a small screen, they're easily readable by the interpreter. So is land cover forest in 2019? Add that as a survey question, and then I'll give them the options of saying yes or no. Then after that, if they say yes, so I would only show this question depending on whether they said yes or no. So my parent question is land cover forest in 2019. If they said yes, I also want them to answer forest change in 2019 to 2022. Did that occur? We'll answer yes or no. And I can have a sub question to depend on that one. So if they answered yes, there was a change, I would say, well, what type of change? And then give them answers like forest loss or forest gain, or maybe forest degradation. Okay. I can also ask questions that are not sub-questions, so there's no parent question. I just want to know, okay, let's give some extra notes. So that would be an input text type of question. And I would just ask for notes on that topic. It pops up as a new separate survey card number. So there's survey card 1. On the right here, it's demonstrating what it would look like for the interpreter, so you can run a quick test. So on survey card 1, if they answered it's land cover forest, yes, this new one would pop up. And if they answered yes again, the type of change would pop up. If they said no, they'd be finished. And they can move to part 2, which is the notes. I need to have a default answer, so I'll just say none, but I am going to require them to enter some kind of text there. There are also types of questions like, let's say if they said, I'm going to do an input number. If there was a forest change, yes. What year was that? Year of change. So see how I wrote that later on, but it was a sub-question to forest change. So it's part of the first survey card, and I need to have a default answer. So I'll just type in 000 so I know whether or not they actually filled in a year, and I'll require text for that. I'll actually not require them to answer extra notes. So you can run some tests over here to see if everything's working as you desire for your questions. And the last part of your CEO data or CEO product creation would be good to go to survey rules. This is totally optional, and you don't have to have these, but they can be handy if you don't want to rely on the interpreters to not make mistakes, which should be impossible. For example, if they had said, let's say incompatible answers, it would be impossible for land cover in 2019 to say it was not forest, but then for the forest change type to say that that from 2019 to 2022 that there was a forest loss because there was no forest to lose. So just to make it impossible for the interpreter to accidentally click that illogical combination, I can add that as a rule. And if they do accidentally do that, a warning would pop up and request they select a different combination that does make sense. There are a couple other types of rules. I most commonly use this incompatible answers, but you can learn more about these other types of rules within the support documentation that's available for Collect Earth Online, as well as everything else I've discussed in those documents. Okay, so once I finish that, I click the review button. I agree to the terms of service and click create project. Okay. Once I've created the project, it will show a demonstration of what it would look like for my plot distribution. And then you can also scroll down and double check all of your quality control, how many points there are, and the survey questions that you have created and survey rules. If you click Publish Project at this point, there are some things you can still edit, but it does become more difficult and some things are not editable once you publish the project. So make sure you double check, and you can test things by clicking this Collect button so you would see it as an interpreter would see your project. So the last thing we're going to do is configure the Geo-Dash. This is a tool that's available to your interpreters. So I'm going to add a widget. A widget is a square within the Geo-Dash. I'm going to make a time series graph, and I would like to do this for NDVI over my time period of interest, January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2022. I'll click Create, and a placeholder image of that time series graph will pop up in the Geo-Dash. You can resize this if you want to however works for you. We can also add another type of widget called the degradation tool. This auto loads NDFI, which is a really great indicator for forest degradation. So I'll give that a name, and I'll do it for the same time period, 2019 to the end of 2022. And again, you can resize that as needed. There are several other widgets that you can add. If you want something more complicated, like a Google Earth Engine image asset, such as the one that we talked about earlier, you would paste in that same image path. Oops, not that one. Here we go. You copy this image ID path and paste that in. I want the base map to the back box satellite, and I'll give it a title for, let's do the dynamic world for 2019 image asset that I have, and I still need to give it those image parameters, just like I did before. So I'll copy paste those. Great. I can resize it or move those around as I see fit. You don't need to hit save anywhere for this. You just hit the X and it will be retained. So now that I'm happy with this project, you can do your final check by clicking the collect button and look at it in draft mode as if you were an interpreter. Oh, I need to do unanalyzed plots. I'll do collect, go to first. Let's see here. Collect. You're in draft mode, unanalyzed. There we go. So I can see my sample location within my larger area of interest. You can zoom out and find where I am. And if I had extra metadata using a CSV file, that would show up here as well. But since I just did random point locations, I just have my imagery options that I've selected. Dynamic world is in there. I think it's in a slightly different area since it was so small. There it is, just a small sample area. If you were doing a real project, you would want to make sure that your imagery that you loaded matched your area of interest, and Planet NICFI here as well. And then here's all the survey questions. So you can do a quick test. Here's that plot confidence slider that you added in. So I'll quit that. Yes, I'm sure. And I'm going to publish that project. So now when I go back to my institution, I can see that project at the very bottom, the CEO demo I just made. You can edit it further a little bit using this edit button, or click on it as a data collector to start adding in your CEO survey answers. So before we go, I also want to show you how to create a project using a template. So it's much the same, except I'm going to utilize this select template feature. So I've created a demo template from another project that I'm going to load in, and I can exactly copy the plots and samples from that project and all of the survey questions and Geo-Dash widgets. I'll give it a name that makes sense. This is an example of a project in Thailand where forest loss, degradation, and gain was analyzed. Since I have both of these checked, you'll notice when I go to the plot design and sample design collection page, plot design and sample design pages, those are already set up. But I could keep all the same survey questions, but input new points, and then these are not filled in, and I would need to select a new CSV file, or a new grid, something like that. So let's use the same points. So that's already ready for us. You can also alter the survey questions. Let's say I wanted to do 2019. Oops. Okay, 2019. And every time I change that, make sure you hit this save button, both for the questions and the answers. So maybe I wanted to say some other answer here, like other, and I would have to add that and make sure I hit save. Or any other small change, I would have to hit the save button next to each of those. And you can add more survey questions too, or delete them, or move them, the order of them around as needed. So once I have it as I like, I even have the rules I want. I hit the review, I agree, create project. And now I have very quickly created a project using a template, so I don't have to do everything by hand. You can see the Geo-Dash board already has some in it because it was copied from a project that did have the Geo-Dash. You can also copy just the Geo-Dash board layout from another project. So there are a lot of projects here. I think we can see all of our projects and the publicly available ones. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that project only had one Sentinel-2 image asset widget. Once I'm happy, I will publish. And that's it. So that's the end of the demonstration for project creation in CEO.